Hello, my name is Raul Peralta and I'm going to talk about my exposition, which is a 53-year-old man with diplopia, polydipsia and polyuria. This is me with my YouTube account and Facebook account. First of all, diplopia is commonly known as double vision, simultaneous perception of two images of a single object that may be displayed horizontally, vertically, and diagonally, or rotationally. It's usually the result of impaired function of the extraocular muscles. Then, polydipsia is an excessive thirst or excessive drinking, non-specific symptom in various medical disorders, each characteristically found in diabetes. And finally, polyuria is the condition of an excessive of abnormality, large production or passage of urine, more than 2.5 or 3 liters over 24 hours in adults. It often appears with polydipsia. The most common case of polyuria in adults and children is diabetes mellitus. In this case, these terms of polydipsia, polyuria, and diplopia, we associate them and it will lead us to diabetes mellitus, although the last symptom is caused by an enlargement of pituitary gland because the sixth nerve was paralyzed and deficit on abductions of both eyes. Treatment of corticosteroids in high dose are drugs to suppress symptoms like headache, ocular stumbles, fever, etc.
Typically, pituitary tumors frequently cause headaches, and patients will come in complaining of significant headaches which aren't alleviated with medications. And so that's one of the most common things that we actually hear. The second most common complaint that we actually see is patients complaining of visual disturbances. Typically, if a pituitary tumor continues to enlarge, it can compress the optic nerve, which then causes loss of vision on the periphery. So patients will complain of loss of vision out on the sides of their visual fields. The third thing patients typically complain about with pituitary tumors is hormonal dysregulation. And so they might have problems with their menstrual cycle. They actually might be lactating even without being pregnant. Those kinds of issues. You can have low testosterone levels. You can actually have low thyroid hormone levels as well. And so any hormonal regulation that the pituitary is involved in obviously can be disrupted in that fashion as well. So those are really the main issues that we hear, especially when it comes to pituitary tumors.
The pros of this case is that corticosteroids like methylprednisone in high dose are drugs of first selection to suppress symptoms, but in this case it wasn't very useful because of the return of symptoms when corticosteroids decrease, so they changed to azathioprine, leading to good results. Meanwhile, with the cons, polydipsia and polyuria, if those symptoms are separate, this wouldn't lead us to firm and correct diagnosis. Also, excess of corticosteroids will develop iatrogenic Cushing syndrome, like face, acne, purple marks, thin skin with easy browsing.
So if I told you about a pituitary lesion, the first thing to understand is the normal anatomy in this area. You have to remember the pituitary gland measures about the size of a kidney bean. It sits right at the base of the brain, right above the earlobes, and right in the middle of the head. And it controls all the hormones in our body. That's why we call this the master gland. And as lesions, whether it be a tumor or a cyst, grow within the pituitary gland, I kind of break it down to 3 problems it can cause. The tumor itself, because it arose out of the pituitary gland, can actually make one of the hormones the gland makes. And these are called secreting tumors. They can cause syndromes like hyperprolactinemia, elevated prolactin levels. They can cause Cushing's disease or acromegaly. However, later in life, the majority of these tumors do not make any hormones. So then as the tumor grows, the second thing that happens is the gland gets compressed. 2 things can't live in the same space. And so whereas the average tumor size may be the size of a walnut or a golf ball, you can imagine taking a golf ball and squeezing it into a kidney bean. What happens over time is the gland gets compressed. And as you slowly squeeze the gland, the hormones the gland makes slowly shut down. Typically the first hormone that's lost is growth hormone, hence why in kids, short stature is one of the most common symptoms that develop. However, after puberty, we don't grow any taller. And so even though most adults will lose growth hormone, they'll be asymptomatic. The next hormone that shuts down are the sex hormones. So in women, it causes premature menopause. That's why oftentimes we'll catch these tumors when they're smaller. In men, the same thing happens, but they lose their testosterone. And unfortunately, as most of the case, we kind of ride this off and saying I'm getting older, or that's not oftentimes picked up. The third hormone that shuts down is thyroid, but you really need a large tumor and loss of a lot of gland before you lose that hormone. And the last hormone to shut down is cortisol, which is a steroid hormone. Now, thyroid and cortisol are both hormones of metabolism, and so it makes sense that the last 2 hormones your body is willing to give up. But all these hormones have to be evaluated in all patients before we consider any treatment. And the last thing we worry about is that the tumor outgrows the cavity, which is called the sella turcica, that it sits in. And so it starts pushing in other structures, the most important of which are the optic nerves. Right above the pituitary gland are the nerves that go from the eyes back to the brain, carrying all the visual information. And as these tumors grow, they can slowly stretch those nerves and cause progressive vision loss. Now, the body is pretty adaptive. Since these tumors grow slowly, there are some patients who will lose up to 50% of their vision and still not realize it. Eventually, once it starts affecting central vision, people will start noticing vision loss, and that's when we oftentimes diagnose these tumors. But by that point, the tumors are already quite large.
Issues applying in Ecuador. Around the world, the prevalence is 38 to 69 cases per 1 million inhabitants. There is a study that was made in Guayaquil, Ecuador, which it prevails in women than men, 1.8 to 1. In conclusion, azathioprine from 6-mercaptopurine is an alternative drug for enlargement of pituitary gland, and polydipsia, polyuria, and diplopia are suggested as a diagnosis of a tumor, which can lead to diabetes mellitus and 6 cranial nerve palsy. Thank you.